Testing, testing. I wonder why it looks like this. Uh, Testing. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna make this video really, really quick because I don't really know how much time I got. And plus, I wasn't really prepping to actually make this video. This is why I'm doing it on the live. I don't even know. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. Hopefully, everything is checking out well. I know nobody's watching, but that shouldn't matter because I think I could still post this. Anyway, lovely to meet you guys. For those that don't know me, my name is Winston, but you could call me Winnie. Um, I am making this video because I needed to decide who to vote for. I was not sure who to vote for, and I knew I needed to make up my mind on that. I'm open for a conversation. I'm open for a back and forth. I'm not here to debate. Debate with your mother. Don't debate with me because I don't debate. All I do is have conversations, and I will leave space to have a conversation. So please, I ask that you leave space to have a conversation with me as well. Um, I also want to say that this is a point in time video, like representing my views, point in time. I could be wrong. I pretty sure I'm right, but I could be wrong. And I would love if I am wrong that y'all give me the space and give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm not out here just trying to hurt people's feelings. That you like approach me as a man and as a human, and that you have a conversation with me and correct me where you feel like I have erred. Okay. Uh, all right. So this video is essentially I want to present like a biblical perspective on the 2024 presidential elections, like the key points. So I've identified like 5 key points, and I want to present both the RNC's stance on it and the DNC's stance on it, and then where I believe the Bible kind of stands on it. No candidate is perfect. No side is perfect. Nobody will thoroughly and concisely and fully represent all biblical views because they are not biblically based. But I think that there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of light that can be shown amongst the two there. I'm basing this based off of a passage of scripture that I read. It's I believe in Joshua where it says a commander of the Lord's armies approaches Joshua, and Joshua is startled and he says, "Are you for us or against us?" And the angel says, "Neither. I'm the captain of the Lord's armies." And a lot of the times, I think that we get so bogged down in these binary views, and we say either you are for us or against us. Are you A or are you B? Right? And I think that as Christians, we have to be cognizant and wise enough to say neither. We're actually not for you or against you. We're actually on God's side. Right? Like the angel says, "I'm the captain of the Lord's armies." He's not saying, "Hey, I'm not on your team. I'm not on the enemy's team. I'm actually on God's side, and you can choose to get with us if you want to be over there." And I think that's what we need to do as Christians. We need to be on God's side rather than just the two binary choices that we have placed in front of us. Cool beans. All right, so I'm gonna just jump into it. The first one is abortion. Okay, so this is like a major issue, right? And like there's never going to be like a perfect answer, a perfect scenario for both of these. Um, but I do believe that there is an ideal thought process, at least, that we can take into this. First things first, right? Um, I just want you guys to have enough information to like, kind of like defend it with enough conviction. Uh, um, let's present the first position first of all, right? So Harris's, aka the DNC. And I'll be using those terms interchangeably. So with Harris, from what I've ascertained, I believe that she does support abortion rights, specifically like reproductive rights as a whole. In office, her platform, she has ran that she would codify Roe v. Wade into law. And for those that don't know what that means, it essentially means like making it a law, making it like the woman able to choose between the women and doctors able to choose whether they want an abortion or not. Okay, so the argument here isn't necessarily for abortion, rather it's for the government not being the deciding factor here. Please hear that. Please understand that. Nobody's arguing for abortion. Like no, I don't think people are like waking up in the morning being like, wow, I can't wait to get an abortion today. Right. Like I don't think that's the argument here. I think the argument is can, can the government tell me what I can do with my own body? Right. Okay. So and then I believe another of her positions and I think she is kind of dying on this hill of like reproductive rights, and that being a main and a key campaign issue for her. But the RNC right now is low key trying to minimize it. The RNC recently just changed their position on this, and they were leaning towards like ban it, right? But now they just changed it towards state level decision making. So they want to leave it up to the states essentially, rather than a federal ban, which they were talking about before, which Trump was talking about as well. Trump heavily opposes abortion rights. Um, and based on his character, I believe that there is like a potential for executive decisions that he makes that can shake some things up. So even if he is elected, and let's say the RNC leans one way versus another, Trump is the same guy that takes credit for appointing, very conservative Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade to begin with. So who knows what he does when he has the executive power, right? The executive decisions that he can make here. In terms of the Bible, though, I think the Bible is very clearly teaches the sanctity of life. The question then should be like, what is considered a human life, right? And I think Jeremiah 1:5 is pretty clear on this. This is God talking to him before he was formed in the womb, right? He says, "Before you were formed in the womb, I knew you, right? I had plans for you. I had a purpose for you." Psalm 139:13-16 kind of doubles down on that thought as well. It says, and let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. Just read it on your own. I want to make this a quick video. I told you already. So Psalm 139, 13-16, I think it doubles down on that pretty well. But based on what the Bible teaches, I think that unborn children are still children, and these are lives that like God cares about and wants to see come to fruition because He has plans and purpose for them. And I know there's like a lot of back and forth between like, okay, at what point is this actually a life, right? Because at conception, this is just a pile of cells, right? At 5 weeks, at 10 weeks, at 20 weeks, at 24 weeks, at 40 weeks, at what point is this a life rather than a parasite? Well, to that, I say I don't know. That is like a really, really gray area for me, and it's something that I struggle with as well. Also, in when we think about like women with extenuating circumstances, like there's a stat that says 1 to 3% of abortions are medically necessary, but realistically, I mean, like what if it's not fully deemed fully medically necessary, but there are other extenuating circumstances that still cover that? So I think that we weren't even checking for those statistics up until recently when this all became a thing. So it's really, really hard. It's a really, really misleading statistic from what I've seen. But what I would just want to present the perspective is that God cares about children, God cares about lives, and God not only cares about children, but He also cares about adults too, right? So like if you want to put the emphasis on caring for the child, and Jesus loves little children, well, Jesus loves adults too, right? Okay. In Genesis 1, God created mankind. He put them in the garden. He gave them everything that they would need to live and thrive. He created us to be loved and to love Him. Even Jesus said in Matthew 22, 37-39, that if He can boil everything down into two commandments, it'd be to love God and love your neighbor. So the problem is that to successfully love someone or something, you need free will, right? And I think free will allows us to make decisions on our own, even if they do not necessarily agree with what God would want you to do, right? So this is why we're continually told to submit our wills to God, because free will is our will supersede God's will on this planet. I'll say that again. Our will supersede God's will on this planet. Why? Because God wills it. Because He has given us free will and the ability to choose. So our will go over His if necessary, right? And if you don't believe me, just ask Job, right, about Nineveh. right? Where God wanted him to go to Nineveh to preach, but Job said no. And guess what happened? Nineveh didn't get preached to by Job, right? Until he had to actually go back and repent and do the whole whale thing. And then finally Job agreed. And then that's what happened. So here's the tension that we need to live in as Christians, right? The tension is God gives us free will to choose to do evil. He does not take that choice away, even if he counts it as sin. Even if he counts it as sin, he still gives us the choice to do it. Now, here's the flip side to that argument. Well, just because I have free will doesn't mean I can just go around murdering people because it's my prerogative because I have free will. I can do whatever I want. It's really depends on like how it affects somebody else, right? To that I'd literally say like ding ding ding. Like I think what makes abortion such a sticky and tricky issue is because I don't know if we all see unborn babies as independent beings, right? Like it really depends at what point you consider that zygote or that you know bundle of cells. At what point do you consider them a being? Really depends on if you see them as a life that can be equated to something like you're murdering them, or are you just stopping them from actually becoming a life? I think that's the tricky part. But in a way, we saw in Jeremiah that God still considers a baby a life slash a soul, and that He values and has plans for that baby, or for that thing that is developing over time. So I believe that if abortion only affected the person getting an abortion, I'd concede to the idea that God gives free will, and we shouldn't necessarily hold back anybody's ability to make decisions for themselves. But I'm leaning towards right now. I'm leaning towards subscribing to the idea um, that baby is a baby, and if given long enough, there will be a baby. If given long enough, there will be a human being with a plan and purpose, and a will and all these things. So because um, your decision to abort that baby affects more than just you, I'm leaning to take that decision and at least put it through a gate, right? So that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. I think that like right now, 13 states have banned abortion, which leaves about 37 states that still allow abortion. Some are limited. I think you can go on reproductiverights.com and find out this information. um, the Democrats right now, they want to codify Roe v. Wade, so they want to make it federally acceptable all states, like making sure that they can. But I think the Republicans, they want to leave it up to the states levels, and I think what that does is kind of like it puts like an extra gate to get through for people that want an abortion. So, for example, women with ectopic pregnancies, extenuating circumstances, they can still technically get the help that they need and deserve by crossing state lines. It is a little bit more inconvenient. I completely understand that perspective. It is tougher. Not everybody will have access to do that. And I think that that's where Republicans really, if you really want to be God centered, you really want to stand 10 toes down on this thing, y'all got to show up for the women that need this, and are unable to get it, right? So set up funds to make it possible for them to go across state lines. Set up a little bit fairer checks, right, to make sure that they're not just getting an abortion to get an abortion, and then also help when these babies are born as well. Like if you really want to stand 10 toes down on this abortion thing, then go stand outside of Planned Parenthood, and when the young lady that comes in looking for an abortion, ask what you can do to help. Right. That's how I feel like you can really live out this principle of loving people and loving your neighbor as best as you can. But all that said and done, I am leaning towards the RNC on this side, and putting it more at the state level and putting that extra gate there in place. So, in my opinion, I would say RNC one, DNC zero on this issue. Okay. The next issue that I'm gonna talk about really quickly is taxes and the economy. So from what I've researched, once again, so Harris proposes is raising taxes on those earning over 400K a year. She wants to increase the corporate tax rate as well. And she supports a 25% minimum tax on the wealthiest households. All right, so this is really just aimed at supporting lower to middle income families and small businesses. And obviously, the this will be subsidized by the larger corporations and by the wealthier families in America. And then obviously different programs to make housing more available, access to entrepreneurship for minorities, and then reduced childcare costs as well. Now, Trump, on the other hand, he wants to expand on his 2017 tax cuts for all the income levels, right? So his idea is if I reduce the tax rate for everybody, these corporations, they would have more money to obviously pay us more money, and then they would also be able to lower their prices because they would have more money as well. So that's really the idea of like promoting American business competitiveness through the lower corporate tax rates. He also wants to impose some like tariffs on imports, right, to incentivize businesses to not just take their companies overseas and employ overseas, but rather to bring a lot of this manufacturing and development back to the United States. So I kind of like that idea a little bit, but overall, it seems like Harris is pushing to give more money and opportunity to the lower and middle class at the expense of the upper class. While Trump, on the other hand, is taking more of like a Reaganomics trickle down approach by proposing that, hey, if I just give tax breaks to everybody, if I just lower everything across the board, eventually it might positively impact everyone, not just the lower and middle class. Um, and I think it's interesting. I think the word of the day today, you're going to hear me say it a lot, is tension. Because if we look at Leviticus 19, 9 to 10, so God gives us a command, right? He didn't give it to us, right? He gave it to the children of Israel at that time, the landowners at that time, aka the business owners, because agriculture was the main source of business for people at that time. He says, "Hey, when you fully reap your harvest, right? I don't want you guys to fully reap it." Right. So I want you to leave the scraps around the edges. I don't want you guys to pick up all the grapes and all the stuff, all the wheat that falls on the floor. I want you to leave the edges of your fields, leave the leftover grapes, leave every wheat that has fallen while you're harvesting. I want you to leave that to the foreigners. I want you to leave that to the poor people, the people that can't afford to do it for themselves. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but God, it's my field. It's my harvest that I worked so hard for. I did this, right? I want to reap the whole thing. Well, to that, I'm gonna tell you what God tells us through His Word in First Corinthians 3:7 to 9. Yeah, you planted. Yeah, you might have watered, but I actually made the harvest grow, right? And I think that this is summed up by a Christian principle called stewardship, right? Where we understand that nothing that we do actually belongs to us, and everything that we own or we think we own actually fully belongs to God. The reason I find this particularly interesting is because Harris's proposal puts an emphasis on helping the people that I believe God really wants us to help. Right. So is it going to sting a bit? Absolutely. Like, trust me, like the tax on families that make more than 400K a year, that's gonna, like, my friends and we're gonna feel that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not there yet, but like I'm one good bonus away from being in the bracket of people affected by these tax by this increased taxes, right? I'm also a business owner. I'm going to feel like those those taxes go up, honestly. Obviously not at the level that like the Bill Gates of the world and the Elon Musks are gonna feel it, but like Amazon paying no local tax and then also paying very little federal tax, like that's insane to me. You know what I'm saying? Like we should care more about like the people that can't take care of themselves and the people that can't provide for themselves, even if it comes at our expense. I think that is a godly principle that we need to be living out. Like the idea is to sacrificially give. I mean, I think that that's what Jesus would want us to do. Now, to balance this from the other side, I think that there is absolutely an emphasis on personal agency that we've kind of just overlooked, right? You can't just live off government cheese. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells us the parable of the master who goes on a journey. And then it mentions that the one who had five started out with 5, and he went out and he got 10, right? So he worked, he started trading, he started doing things, and he ended up with 10. The one that had 2 ended up with 4. But the one who only had 1, who dug a hole and buried the hole, and buried the one that he got in the hole. It says that when the master came back, he actually commended the workers who actually put in work and multiplied what they were given. But the one that did nothing with it, and just sat idle, he actually punished him, right? So the moral of this is that we're all given talents. We're all given time, resources, intellect, a skill set. We're all given something. And it's a matter of what you actually do with it, right? We're encouraged to use it to progress the kingdom of God forward. I don't think God condones idleness. I think, in fact, 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says that those that don't work should not eat. So notice it says that those that don't work, not those that can't work. This is important because there are a lot of people that are abusing the system, right? Those that don't work and they're eating for free. Yes, they don't work, but there are also those that cannot work. Now, yes, there are people abusing the system, and there are people that still need the system. So like the question then should be like, should we throw everything away because people are abusing it? I would argue absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I think there's biblical precedent for it. I think in Genesis 18, when God and a couple angels come down to investigate Sodom and Gomorrah, on the way there, he stops to commune with Abraham, and Abraham is like, knowing that his nephew is in Sodom at the time. He's like, yo, God, if there's 50 righteous people in Sodom, will you wipe it away? No. If there's 45, what about if there's 30? What about if there's 10? Right. And each time God is like, no, if I find that many righteous people in it, I will not destroy it. Right. Matthew 13 is another example of this. Where Jesus tells the story about like the parable about the weeds and the wheat, how when in the nighttime, the enemy came and he sowed weeds among the wheat, and the reason that the weeds and the wheat are growing together right now is if so that if the weeds are cut, the wheat might be affected as well. So God doesn't want that to happen. So he'll let them all grow at the same time. And then at the end of the age, that's when the separation will be happening, right? I don't think that there will ever not be weeds in a wheat harvest, right? The point is that just because there are weeds in a system doesn't mean that we throw the whole system away. No, we have to preserve the wheat, right? We have to take care of the people that need the system, even though there are people abusing the system. So I believe that we should be willing as Christians to come out of pocket to help our fellow man, even if you worked hard for your harvest, because it's not yours, it's God's, and you're stewarding it. Even if it costs you the luxuries in life that you deserve. Yes, yes, I'm sure you deserve that extra vacation. Yes, I'm sure you worked really, really hard to get your luxury vehicle. And you should be willing to come up out of pocket to help your fellow man, right? And especially if you can afford it, like especially if it's not going to drastically change your standard of living. And I'm not saying that you can't, like drastically change your standard of living doesn't mean um making sure that you can't take like an extra vacation or something like that. That to me is not drastically changing your standard of living. Like drastically changing your standard of living is like you have to move out of your house because you can no longer afford it, right? Like stuff like that I wouldn't recommend. But if you have to give up an extra vacation, if you have to give up a couple nights of eating out, for your fellow man, like do that. I believe that that's what God would want you to do. So because of this, I actually lean more towards the DNC's position on this, and I have to go RNC1, DNC1 on this. I am for, in terms of taxing the economy, I lean towards Kamala's plan for this. Okay. The third hot button issue for me is immigration. So I think Kamala wants to, if I'm not mistaken, I think she still cares about border security, even though she kind of fumbled that bag a little bit. But they're looking for more of like they support the bipartisan border security bill. They want to increase funding for Border Patrol and staffing. They want to create more pathways for legal immigration, right? And allow spouses, fiancés, children to continue to work and to get work in the U.S. more quickly. They also want to reform the asylum system to process claims more efficiently. They want to maintain production protections for DACA recipients. They want to create pathway to citizenship for more undocumented immigrants, address root causes of immigration and illegal immigration, and migration from other countries, particularly Central America. And they want to end like discriminatory travel immigration bans, and also like the wealth test for immigrants as well. And if you haven't heard of the wealth test, it's actually kind of like bonkers in my opinion. It's essentially a rule that if that like officials can deny your green card or what's the word I'm looking for, or visas, essentially, if they deem that you might need government assistance in the future, right? So if you ever needed something like food stamps, if you ever use like housing vouchers, Medicaid, or something, it could negatively hurt your application, or it could hurt your application in the future because obviously they're looking at that like, oh, if you use it in the past, you'll probably use it in the future. And I think on paper when he thought about this, like he thought like, wow, this is really fire, but it actually just it really is very discriminatory, and it clearly favors a specific demographic of people, right? Trump, on the other hand, right, like he wants stricter border control. He wants to do mass deportations. He wants to propose a more stringent vetting procedure for immigrants, um, end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants, right? Advocate for stricter asylum rules and reinstate the policies like Remain in Mexico. Support increased funding and authority for immigration enforcement. And he wants to argue that like the Democrats essentially have led to a huge border crisis and increased illegal immigration. Okay, so I think the Bible is clear to love your neighbor and care for the immigrants, specifically in Exodus 22:21 and Leviticus 19:33, when God was giving laws on how Israel was to conduct themselves as they were becoming a nation. He specifically mentioned and told them to treat the stranger with all the care that you would treat somebody that was actually in you at first, right? He told them to treat the strangers, aka the sojourners, right, in their land. Don't treat them wrongly because you were once sojourners as well. And I think this is really important to note, right? I believe there's a stat that says as of 2022, like 1 in 4 children had at least one immigrant parent. Now, if we stretch that back to like 3 or 4 generations, I can confidently say like almost everybody in the United States, maybe like 80% of people, I think that at least one, you know at least somebody that has an immigrant in their family. If you stretch it back at least 4 generations, if not, you are like directly involved in in slavery. And then if that's the case, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, I think if you want to take this like a step further, and look at it from like a fully biblical view, we're all sojourners, right? We're all immigrants because, like, like as Christians, we believe that like our kingdom is really heaven, and like we're just on earth temporarily. So technically, like we're all immigrants on earth. You know what I'm saying? Like immigrants on earth. Long story short, I think that we're all immigrants, right? I think that we should be encouraged to follow the laws of whatever land that we are living on, and that includes like respecting drawn borders as well. I think in Deuteronomy 19:14, another law was given to Israel talking about how they shouldn't remove any ancient landmarks, aka respect the boundaries that were set before you. Of course, there are deeper theological meanings behind this particular Bible verse and comment and command, but at face value, it's at least showing some sort of honor, right, for property rights and territorial divisions, right? I think, as a matter of fact, in Romans 13, Paul, who was, mind you, he was under Roman occupation at the time. Like I think he was in prison at the time. He tells us to obey the laws of the land as well, except when a law like directly contradicts with a biblical law. That's the only time we're told to disobey a law of the land. I believe when the apostles were like, "Hey, we must follow God, not man." But even so, right? Jesus even tells us to pray for our leaders because they have the power to make our lives difficult on earth, right? We're still told to obey them because they have been allowed in position by God, not by man. So here's the word of the day again: tension, right? The biblical stance on illegal immigration is to not allow it. It's to follow the laws of the land. It's to obey, the laws that are given to us. But the biblical stance on immigration is to welcome and accept it, and accept the immigrants with open arms. I think, in my opinion, the DNC aligns more with this biblical stance because of their emphasis on still preserving border security, but instead of mass deportation and stricter immigration policies, they're actually looking to make that process a little bit easier and then make that process more efficient, right? Creating pathways for legal immigration and employment of immigrants rather than just kick them out and be gone with them. I don't think that that's the biblical position that God would want us to rock with. So for that, I'm leaning towards the DNC on this as well. I'm leaning towards Kamala. So right now for me, it's Kamala 2, Trump 1. Okay. Cool. So then the fourth point that I have is on foreign policy and NATO. And so this one's kind of like, I actually wanted to leave this one off realistically, just because um I wasn't really able to find like much text to speak directly to foreign policy in the Bible. I think this is one of those situations where it's like smoking weed, where like the Bible doesn't specifically mention it, but it does give guiding principles and help on how to determine a view of it and a way forward. And I thought about leaving this one out because I didn't really have like a clear conviction on it, but I figured like you might as well like see me like wrestle with it. Like you might as well see me find the tension points, right? In these tension moments. And I think that like in an effort to be transparent and like vulnerable and authentic here, this is just kind of this is kind of what Christians need to do. Like we need to be seen wrestling. Like we need to be seen weighing text with how we feel about people, with like these biblical principles, with these ideas, these cultural ideas. Like I think that this is healthy and normal, right? So that this is what I'll be doing right now. So let's go. Let's try it. All right. So Harris, in terms of strengthening alliances, I believe she wants to emphasize revitalizing the American diplomacy by strengthening alliances, particularly NATO alliances. Wants to focus on creating more allies and encouraging them to build up their defenses. She places a strong emphasis on Europe at the beginning of the foreign affairs section, highlights the success of uniting allies against Russia, advocates for strengthening alliances, structures in the Indo Pacific to counter China, supports a strategy of de risking economic ties with China without fully decoupling, calls for an end to support for the Saudi led war in Yemen, seeks a diplomatic solution to the Israel Hamas conflict, calling for a ceasefire, pledges to use force only when necessary and as a last resort, aims to end some of these forever wars responsibly, and emphasizes diplomatic, intelligence, and law enforcement tools over military intervention. Cool. That's Kamala. Trump, on the other hand, he emphasizes an America First approach, right, to foreign policy. So this can be things like telling NATO, like, hey, y'all actually need to increase your defense spending too. Like, we can't big brother this thing the whole time. He also takes more of like a confrontational stance with China. He's an advocate for economic decoupling. And then he sides with Israel, so he holds like a strong alliance with Israel. Advocates for a tougher stance on Iran, and he obviously emphasizes maintaining a very strong military as well. Um, and I think that in terms of the Bible, I think that the Bible teaches a very consistent message. I keep saying this, keep coming back to it. Teaches a very consistent message on loving your neighbor. So now, being loving to your neighbor means extending the same level of compassion and care that you would for your neighbor, that you would for yourself, to them as well. then I think the next logical question then is like, who is my neighbor? And luckily, this question was already asked and answered by the disciples and answered by Jesus when he told the parable of the Good Samaritan. So a man was brutally attacked, left for dead on the side of the road. A priest walked by, did nothing. A temple assistant walked by, did nothing. And then lastly, the Samaritan, the Bible actually calls him a despised Samaritan, walks by. And that's the person that actually does something, right? And I find this story interesting because the priest and the temple assistant, these would be like the church people of the day. And they did nothing, right? These would be like church folk who, for some reason, are quick to cross the other side when people that don't look like them get hurt or affected, while the despised people of the world, right, are the ones that actually jump into the fire, actually jump in to help people and be the true neighbor. So based on that parable, like I define my neighbor as someone that I have the opportunity to love. If someone falls into the category of you having the opportunity to love them, they are your neighbor. Like you are obligated as a Christian by your rabbi, Jesus Christ, to love them despite how they feel about you, despite what the propaganda is about them, despite how you might feel about them in that moment as well. So now what does that have to do with foreign policy? Well, I think the obvious conclusion would be towards helping others in time of crisis, and continue to be their neighbor, right? This can be through alliances, this can be through aid, this can be through our humanitarian efforts, et cetera, et cetera. Now, on the flip side of this, because I always want to present two sides, and once again, not a debate, not an argument, just a conversation. On the flip side, and I really hope I'm not like eisegizing this the text too much here, but in Matthew 7, 5, it teaches us another lesson about personal accountability. We're told to take the log out of our eye before we take the speck out of our brothers. And I got to be frank, I think that the United States in particular, we are often involved in things that we have no business being involved in. Maybe we can take a lesson and just take the log out of our own eye before looking to have a address or fix a speck in somebody else's eye. I think that maybe taking a U.S. first or a domestic centered approach would be good for the U.S. So that we can kind of take our hands off of a lot of things that we have no business attending to. And I think that there's a lot of ways that this can happen, but I think the clearest path to doing this and taking like a domestic centered approach would be, removing some economic dependencies from other countries, maintaining our military strength, right, and directing more resources towards Americans rather than overseas. Um, and in my opinion, I believe that that aligns more closely with the RNC than with the DNC. So for that, I'm gonna go DNC two, RNC two on this. So they're tied. The last one is candidate ethics, and I thought about this one as well. Um, and like I could have listed out like all of the allegations and stuff that each candidate has done. But here's the thing: we all have different definitions of ethics, and I believe in objective morality. So I base my ethics off of the Bible. I believe that the Bible is the definer. I believe that God of the Bible is the definer of ethics and morality. So I believe that what He has to say about it is what it is. So when I compared both candidates to what the Bible kind of has to say, like the ethics described in the Bible, surprisingly, like 99.999% of everyone who has ever lived, they all fall short. Right. So like they don't meet up. And one thing is clear though. I think that while Kamala is known for changing her views and changing to kind of fit the specific rooms that she's in. Um, Trump is just incendiary in his comments. In my opinion, I think the rhetoric that he inspires is a bit dangerous. And the worst part of it is he does it like while cosplaying as a Christian. They both cosplay as Christians, but Trump does so like boldly in our face. to the point where he has like a bunch of like evangelical Christians believing that like he's their guy, like to the point where like they are voting for him solely because view him as King Darius or something like that. It's so weird. It's so weird. Anyway, in Revelations 3:16, God gives a message to cosplayers. He says, "Since you are lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth." I feel like with Kamala, we know what she is. Like we know that she is. She don't really mess with Christianity like that. Like it's easy to see that in her policies, right? Um, but Trump though, like he be playing in our faces, and we be letting him play in our faces. Like he printing Bibles like with his face on them, like while telling people to grab, the opposite sex by their private parts, and calling Haitians pet eaters, and like just wilding like he's been convicted of crime after crime, convicted of being like accused of being racist, just so many accused of sexual assault, impeached, inciting riots, like so many things that this man has done while like posing to be like a Christian. With Kamala, she's done awful things as well, accepting bribes from Planned Parenthood, right? Using her position as a district attorney to prosecute people that for a fact that should not have been prosecuted, right? Like and like giving out harsher sentences to specific demographics of people, like so many things that is just bad on both sides. But like when it comes down to it, I think like we got to ask the question, like who is going to inspire people to be more loving towards their neighbor? Who is going to overall, do I trust to actually do what they say, or rather what either RNC or DNC do I trust to do what they say? And for that, I lean towards Kamala as well. I lean towards the DNC on that. And yeah, that is literally it. That is how I made my decision to vote for Kamala. And yeah, and like I said, if you guys are down to have a conversation about this, feel free. Let me know. I'm totally available, down to chat at any time. Once again, if you want to debate, if you want to box, if you want to slap box, if you want to fight, you know where my address is. I'm down. I could throw the hands anytime. But if you want to talk, you also know where my address is. I'd much rather appreciate that than a slap box. But I, do want to throw the hands. I'm here. But yeah, other than that, just want to tell you guys, man, to go vote. Right? Please go vote. Don't not vote. And not just don't vote, but like we all complain about like, oh, these are the only two choices we have, but like it's really not. Like we did bad. Like it came down to these two, right? Like there are local elections like in your municipality, like in your specific state, in your towns, in your cities, your schools, that are way more impactful to you on a day-to-day than just the presidential election. Right? These issues didn't just pop up. They don't just pop up every 4 years. They're consistently and constantly happening and evolving. So yeah, get out and vote locally as well, right? Get informed and make decisions locally as well. All right. Yeah, I think that's all I got for today. I love you guys. I will catch you guys later. Peace. Let me see. I don't know how to stop this. This is like my first live. So let's see. How do I stop this? Oh, yeah. All right. Peace.